And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Experience Hockey Talk, serious hockey talk for serious hockey fans. And I am always Michael, me not pretty as always. And I welcome you to this week where we're not going to focus so much on the Capitals in the NHL. While yes, Alexander Ovechkin did score his 600th goal of his career this past week. But this weekend, it is the beginning of the National Women's Hockey League's Isobel Cup Playoffs. And joining me now is Erica Ayala. I hope I said that right. I mispronounce everyone's names apparently now when I bring them on the show. Erica, welcome to the show, and how are you this morning?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm doing well. It's a sunny day here in New York. Looking forward to the weekend.
Well, it was sunny this morning here in Germantown, Maryland, but it is now very cloudy. You stole my sunshine.
Well, I'll keep it for a little bit if you don't mind.
All right, sounds good. Now, let's start off with last week real quick. Last week you had the Buffalo Beauts defeat the Connecticut Whale 4-1, and the Metropolitan Riveters also defeating the Boston Pride 4-1. Last week didn't really bear any meaning in regards to the standings, as that was determined the week before. What did you take out of these last two games of the regular season between these four teams?
As far as the results, I think they more or less indicated kind of how the season has gone for all four teams. The Buffalo Beauts were able to continue on and are taking a 10-game win streak into the playoffs. And this is a team that's had to scrap come out of third to get to the final in the first two seasons. Then you have the Riveters, started from the bottom, now we're here. I've seen tweeted out in that first season they had that fourth place finish, finished second last season, couldn't quite make it to the final. So they're looking to have a good semifinal. Then you have Boston and Connecticut. Both teams, I think, have struggled to play a complete 60 minutes. But you see flashes of what the teams could be when they pull it all together for both. I'd say Boston more so towards the end. They really started to pull together some wins where, again, Connecticut has just struggled with inconsistency. But we see that all teams have brought in players right before that roster freeze. So we'll see if some players will make an impact as we head into the playoffs.
Now, one thing you're mentioning with Boston, one of the biggest things about Boston is that they don't have about half the roster that they had the last two seasons. And, with the likes of Hilary Knight recently signing with Les Canadiens de Montreal in the CWHL, what impact do you think that has really taken on the Boston Pride this season?
Well, there's no doubt when you lose a good portion of your team, and a lot of them playing and winning a gold medal, mind you, in the Olympics. I mean, that's going to take a toll on any team. But they front-loaded their team in that way, and it was successful in the first season. But don't forget that team also lost to the Beauts last season. So I think, obviously, from not only a skill perspective, but I'd say even more so from a chemistry perspective. This is a short season in NWHL. I think you saw the Boston Pride really have to figure some things out. What they did, though, is they brought in players that were familiar with the league. So you had players like, as you well know, Skarupa and Haley Skarupa, of course, and Dana Trevino, who played for the Whale last season. Both came over to the Pride, and then, of course, Skarupa went on to compete in the Olympics. They also brought over players like Janine Weber, who played with the New York Riveters as they were last season, as well as Paige Harrington, who played with the Buffalo Beauts. So they took a different approach. Although they're new players having to get used to each other, they're not new to the league as compared to Connecticut, who had a roster pretty much full of rookies.
Yeah, and when you look at that, Connecticut went from being a team that was a top two team, but could never get out of the semifinals, to being now like a last place team. What was it like to see that happen with the Connecticut Whale?
Well, I think it's interesting because if you look at again, if you just look at the standings as they were, the Connecticut Whale took that top seed in the first year, and but they struggled also last season. I think also if you listen to what some of the Connecticut players have been saying this season, they really um, were looking for a culture shift. And I think they felt that some of the inconsistencies that they had in season one and season two came from just not a good fit, perhaps, in the locker room, which is something that they're not saying this season. So when you're kind of rebuilding a culture, but also rebuilding with new players, I think that was just a little bit more difficult since, again, in a short season, no other teams were doing that to the extent that Connecticut was doing that. So I think it'll be interesting to see if Connecticut can keep a core, what they'll look like next season. Because if the culture conversation and if that was really an important piece of what head coach Ryan Equali was doing, then you would only think that next season they'll get better. Or I should say, will they be able to pull it together in the playoffs? I think it's still kind of a large hump for them to overcome, but I'm curious to see if they could pull some of that together and really go off of, again, what they've said has been so important to them, which is building that culture and having the right type of players in a system together.
Right, and I actually made a mistake. In 2015-16, the inaugural season, Connecticut was in second place with a 13-5-0 record. In 2016-17, last season, Connecticut was actually in last place with a 5-12-1 record.
Yep.
And then this season, they were 13-11-2. Obviously, this season was 2 games shorter than the previous 2 seasons. So one could assume if you still had those 2 additional games, there could be a chance they could have hit the 5-win mark this season again. So, and culture change is a hard thing to do. You can't just do it. It's something that they can't do overnight, and obviously you're seeing those growing pains right now. But then you look at 2 teams in the Metropolitan Riveters who, before the season, announced the partnership with the New Jersey Devils, a 3-year partnership. And then in the middle of the season, the Buffalo Beauts being purchased by the Pegula family, who also owns the Buffalo Bills and Sabres. Since that time, the Beauts have gone on a tear, and since the Riveters announced their partnership, they started off the season red hot. What impact do you think the Devils have had on the Riveters and the Sabres have had on the Buffalo Beauts this season?
Well, I'll start with the Devils. I think if you listen to Kira Dostal in particular, one of the defenders for the Riveters that's been there since the first season, you'll hear her and other players really talk about how the partnership between the Devils became public and was announced. And we know that including this season will be a 3-year partnership. However, in season 1, the New Jersey Devils, or I should say Barnabas, hosted the Isobel Cup Playoffs, or the finals, and it was a 3-game series at that time when, of course, the Boston Pride won the cup. But they won that cup in Newark, New Jersey. Then you look at season 2, the Riveters called Barnabas their home ice for the first time. And then in season 3, we see the partnership, the name change, and some of those other things. So first, I think it's important to realize that this didn't come necessarily out of the blue as far as, a relationship that was there. And I think that some players, they acknowledge that, which I think is pretty cool. But the Metropolitan Riveters were able to host their home opener at the Rock, so that's the Prudential Center, of course. And I think that just helps with exposure. I think that there are things that fans in particular had announced early on in that partnership that could be improved. But I think since, I'd say at the top of the year, the New Jersey Devils have really helped with, on their brand new big screen, promoting the Riveters, having Riveters players like Harrison Brown participate in Pride Night. Of course, Harrison was one of the sports ambassadors for Hockey is for Everyone month last month. And so I think from an exposure perspective, that's what I've been able to see as far as the Devils' partnership with the Metropolitan Riveters. I think it's similar to what's happening with the Buffalo Beauts being now full-out owned owned by the Pagulas. And I've spoken to players like Courtney Kunichika, Dan Rice, he's a writer with the NWHL and covers the Riveters and the Buttes rather closely. He wrote a great story where he spoke with Corrine Bowie, and it's interesting to hear from the players what the partnership looks like on the ground. Of course, the salaries aren't changing right now, at least. So although there's outright ownership, the Buffalo Buttes are still, their salary is within the ranges that were announced earlier in this season. But you'll hear Corrine, or you'll read in that article that Dan Rice put together, that Corrine says that things like meals before weights and before and after practices, things like being able to get better ice time so that, and a change in practice time so that more of the Buttes players can come and practice together. That's something that when I spoke to Courtney Kunichika, she said that early on in the season, and has been a trend in Buffalo truly for all 3 seasons. It's very rare to have all of the players, all of the teams on the ice. So that makes things like special teams difficult to practice. It makes things like that chemistry and camaraderie difficult to manage. And what Courtney was saying is that over time, with the partnership, with the help of the partnership, again, as Corrine was saying, but then just the little things and scheduling being different, that allows the team not only to do things on the ice together, but also to get to know each other off of the ice, is what Courtney was saying. And I think all of those things together have helped with their 10-game win streak. But I think you can say that, again, the opportunity to open up that time and space to the ice together has come from that partnership, and the Pagulas being able to advocate for the Buttes in that way as far as scheduling. I think also you see marketing, and now Buttes gear is being sold, at Sabres games in the Sabres store, stuff like that. Even the city of Buffalo has really embraced, the Buttes, as there's a local pub right there in the Harbor Center that will show Buttes away games on the big screen. So those things are important. They're small still, but they're so important for a startup league. And I'm excited that through the Pagulas and through the partnership with the Devils, that the NWHL are enjoying those perks.
All right, and that's a good lead-in to our first Isobel Cup semifinals matchup, which will pit the Boston Pride versus the Buffalo Buttes tonight at 5:30 p.m. at the Harbor Center, which is where the Buffalo Buttes have been playing for all 3 of their seasons. 5:30 p.m. start time. It's going to be live on Twitter. What are some of the keys to the game for the Boston Pride for this game?
The keys to the game for Boston are going to be that top line that they have, which is Jillian Dempsey, Emily Field, and rookie Sydney Daniels. They have, as the Boston team has gotten stronger, as the season has gone on, towards the end of the season, I should say, that top line has really made an impact. I think, though, what they're going to need is an outstanding performance by Brittany Ott. We've seen her take Buffalo to a scoreless overtime and then shootout. Unfortunately lost for Boston and Ott, but I think we know from this season and in seasons past in particular what type of a goalie Brittany Ott can be, and they're going to need her. I think what we have not seen as much from the Boston team is consistency defensively, not only in being able to stop teams and really break down teams before they get to Ott and crash the net, but also in being able to contribute to the offense. Players that stand out who can do that are Alyssa Gallardi. She's up for Defender of the Year. She's has a career high in points this season and goals. She got her first 2 professional goals this season, and she is a veteran player that's going to be important. I think also the addition of Kaylee Fratkin in the middle of the first part of the season has been good. Kaylee Fratkin is comfortable being a solid defender, but also is very aggressive and can start an offensive threat for the Pride from the blue line. And I think when she is most comfortable and is playing her game, that's what she's able to do. So those are some of the keys. A player that I think really needs to have a standout game is Janine Weber. She's been a little quiet this season. She's been dealing with injury, but Janine Weber, she can be lethal when she's running on all cylinders, and it would be a great time from a Boston Pride perspective if she were to get hot in the semifinals.
Yeah, what player in hockey is not playing with injuries? Yeah, that's the greatest question of all time. And now looking at the Buffalo Beauts, they're the home team for this one. What are your keys to the game for the Buffalo Beauts?
I think you really can't overstate what Amanda Levier has been for the Beauts, really since the playoffs last season, and certainly through this 10-game win streak. The Beauts are an aggressive team. I think early on they had difficulty kind of managing that within the bumps and bruises and chirping that will go on in a hockey game. But they've really settled in to being able to do that. I think it's interesting. They're a team that they're definitely going to come at you with their skill, but they're also, again, they're going to chirp. They're going to throw some elbows, and I mean that respectfully. You play hockey, so you know how it goes. There's a bit of gamemanship that goes, right? Hockey is a contact sport, and sometimes you have to initiate contact, and that's a part of the game. And I think the Beauts do that. Now they can also get in their own head, though, as they're trying to get in the heads of their competitors. So being able to find and draw the line between professional chirping, if you will, and the gamesmanship, and not taking that too far, is going to be a key for them. I mentioned Courtney Kunichika. She's got great vision on the ice. She's one of the silent leaders, along with Lisa Chesson, I'd say, who doesn't always get her just due. But they're a solid team. It's just a matter of them, again, playing their game, but not overdoing it or underselling it to the point where they allow the Boston Pride to get comfortable in the game. But I see this game tilting in favor of the Buffalo Beauts.
Yeah, and I'll attest to this. As you mentioned, I do play. I've talked about it several times on this show in the 3 years I've been doing this show. Yeah, chirping is good. In ice hockey, I was a third, fourth line grinder, so it was my job to hit people and chirp them. In the DCHL now, it's a non-hitting league, but I still find my ways to get a couple shots in here or there. But it's interesting. I'm more in a transitional role where I'm more like coaching players than actually going after and trying to crush them now. So it's a weird transition for me right now. But if you had to pick the winner right here, right now, Buffalo Beauts, Boston Pride, who's moving into the Isobel Cup Championship game next weekend?
Yeah, if I were a betting woman, which I am not, I would go again with the Beauts. I think it'll be closer than most expect, but I'm gonna go with Buffalo for this one. It's a home game. They're riding that streak, and I think they've learned some lessons from years past, and I think they don't seem to want to take this defending the crown opportunity to chance, and so I really expect them to buckle down.
Now, one of the interesting things that needs to be brought up about this, though, is that Buffalo-Boston has been your Isobel Cup Championship game the last 2 seasons. It is now guaranteed a different team will be playing for the Isobel Cup next weekend between the Connecticut Whale and the Metropolitan Riveters. Starting off with the Connecticut Whale, what are your keys to their game tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the Barnabas Health Hockey House?
I've been able to speak with the Whale players, and I asked a bunch of them, including Casey Anderson, Kira Goen, Coach Aquali, and Jordan Brickner, who this is her third season with the team. I asked them, the Whale will win on Sunday if/when. And each of them basically said the same thing. When we score more than the other team, in this case the Riveters. But they also added to play a complete 60 minutes. Again, that's something that unfortunately the Whale just has not been able to do. I think they've come close to a complete game, as it would turn out, they've been closest to a complete game when they play the Riveters. So I wonder if knowing that and knowing that they have that in their back pocket and that they just have to dig a little deeper, I'm curious to see if that will pan out for them. So in addition to just playing a complete 60 minutes, the Connecticut team has been doing much better than earlier on in the season in getting shots on goal. Now what they need to do a little bit better is really find their shot, just not any shot or a shot. Be a little more selective and be more efficient. Ryan Equality in practice, I heard him talking to the team. He said if we were to line up 20 pucks right now, our statistics say that only one of those pucks go in. Whereas roughly 40 would go in, or excuse 40, that's a bit much. they doubled the pucks. No, if you have 20 pucks, 4, would go in. And so that's going to be important for the Buttes to take away opportunities, but also to take their opportunities, not play so tight, but also, again, just create space. I think the Whale are pretty direct with their offensive game. I'd like to see them get the defense and the opposing netminder moving a little bit more, and I think they'll open up the ice for a few more goals.
Yeah, and then looking at the first place Metropolitan Riveters, what are your keys to the game for them?
They just gotta stay relaxed.
I just like how you just go like, man, they just gotta take that deep breath before you go into it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was able to speak to Katie Fitzgerald before or after, I should say, their Thursday practice. They'll actually be practicing again today, both Connecticut and the Riveters. But what Katie was saying is that going into the playoffs last year, she felt the team was just tight. The Riveters, as a franchise, have been the underdog for so long, and heading into the playoffs last season, and certainly towards the end of the regular season this year, they haven't had that. So that chip on the shoulder, now they have to, if you will, kind of artificially create it, because that's been so much a part of their character, of their makeup. And what Fitzgerald was saying is that they just felt a little tight last year going into the first round of the playoffs. She's looking for the team to, just take that breath, play their game, not take things too seriously, so have fun. It was funny, Stretch Johnston, I have some video I have to tweet out later today, but she brought her little dog out on the ice. So they're literally just taking it nice and easy, just having fun with it, playing hockey, having fun with each other. But from a technical perspective, with Mia Dench back now, I want to see the team really be just brutal on that forecheck like they were in the beginning of the season. Katie Fitzgerald, I think, has struggled is tough. I think maybe she's not completely satisfied with the way she's been able to perform as a part of her Riveters team. So I'd like her to settle in a little bit more. I think the Riveters can be a team to play at the level of their opponents for times, and kind of settle into whatever the other team is giving them. I don't think they can afford to do that. Not only this game, but should they advance for the rest of the way, really. I want to see them play Riveters hockey from the beginning and be unrelenting. You're going to need a big game from, of course, Alexa Grushow. You're going to need a big game from Katie Fitzgerald. And I'd like to see players like Kelsey Colzer, and I'll also call out Kira Dostal and Michelle Picard for them really to have solid games, because everyone knows who the Gunners are, so to speak, on the Riveters. So it's going to be some other players that are going to have to step up throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, and you're mentioning Katie Fitzgerald. I think the best way to put it is that she's going through a funk right now, kind of like the equivalent to what Braden Holtby for the Washington Capitals is going through. He's going through a funk. He's trying to fight through it.
Right.
And you just got to, and as a goaltender, you just got to play through it to get out of it. And,
right.
If there's any time to do it, now's the time to do it. So,
Yeah, and she had a good game against Boston. Daniels, I mentioned Sydney Daniels earlier. She just kept kind of smacking at a puck that Katie was trying to cover up. Other than that, she would have had another shutout for the season. So I think she's in a good place, but I agree. It's just about, all right, I can do this. I've done this for, however many years. This is another game. Let me just do what I have to do, make corrections as needed, and just be confident.
yeah. If you had to pick a winner, I know you're lean towards the Riveters, but who do you see winning this game? And let's throw a little caveat into it. What do you see the score being for this game between the Connecticut Whale and the Metropolitan Riveters tomorrow night at the Barnabas Health Hockey House?
Yeah, this is interesting because I think it's pretty well documented. I began my NWHL career as a fan, as a Riveters fan, but I've had the absolute pleasure of working very closely with the Whale team this year. So this is going to be interesting for me to watch. But I also think we've seen really close games up until the third period between these two teams. Connecticut's the only team to take the Riveters to overtime. That was the game that Kimberly Sass started. I'm definitely leaning. My gut is telling me that the Riveters will win this game. I think it's a pretty big hump to overcome. Not impossible for the Whale, but if the Riveters are playing their A game, the Connecticut Whale will need that and then some. And unfortunately, we just have not seen that consistently for the Whale team. So I think, though, that both teams are going to really come out fast. The reason I love watching Connecticut and the Riveters play is because the game, sometimes you have to just check if you're breathing because the game just goes. But with that said, I think there's potential for there to be a lot of goals. For Connecticut's sake, I kind of hope that they can get at least, they need to get at least 2 goals. They really need 3, I think. So I'm going to give them 3 goals. I'm going to give them 3 goals, but if they score 3, then I think Connecticut goes 5. That's the score I gave on the Founding Four podcast with Mike Murphy. So I'm going to stick with that, 5-3 in favor of the Riveters.
All right. Now, next thing I want to talk to you about is obviously at the end of last season, after the Isobel Cup was awarded to the Buffalo Beauts, the NWHL did a tease, which we never saw anything come out of that, and we all thought it was going to be potential expansion or whatever. With the talk of now Buffalo being owned by the Bagulas, the partnership with the Riveters and the Devils, Commissioner Danny Ryland has come out and openly said that Pittsburgh, my area, Washington, D.C., and a couple others are on a very short list for expansion. Do you think expansion in Season 4 would be a good thing for the league? Or do you think it might be a little too fast for the league?
That's an interesting question. My gut is to say that it would be a little too fast with the exception of the Pittsburgh area. I think that the league, with adequate partnerships and with a financial stability, could bring in a Pittsburgh team next season. I don't know that the other markets, the league itself, at least publicly, has connected themselves to those regions enough. Whereas I think if they wanted a team in Pittsburgh tomorrow, from a fan perspective at least, that they'd be able to sell tickets and to get a fan base, and that's important, right? You got to sell tickets. Fans are the people that buy tickets to watch these games. And again, it just seems that Pittsburgh, the Penguins, allowing the NWHL to use the practice facility twice now, last season for the All-Star game, and then this year for a neutral site game between the Utes and the Connecticut Whale. That seems to make good sense to me. Not sure the expand beyond Pittsburgh.
Right. And but one other question for that is if they do expansion, which I do agree, it might be a little too fast. Could you do it with just one team, or would you want to do it with two teams to keep the league kind of even with the number of teams?
Yeah, that's I think ideally it would be nice to bring in two, so then to have six teams. But if you look at the CWHL, they've had five teams up until this season for a number of years and have been able to make it work. I think what could happen there is that maybe you extend the season a little bit as far as the timeline for the season, and you give some some bye weekends, I guess you would say, or like a weekend off for the odd team out. I don't know. I get the sense that players like to play every weekend, especially since it's a short season. It's only one game per weekend, as opposed to the CWHL, which does a series. So yeah, I think I could see pros and cons for both ways. But I think, again, just thinking about from a partnership, from a fan base perspective, I don't know that it makes good sense to bring in another team other than Pittsburgh.
So what you would be saying is that maybe just try to do some more neutral site games for at least the next season and try to hit different markets and see how they do before trying to go for expansion.
That's my gut. Yeah, I think I would like to see the league kind of branch out further west and try to make their way out to Minnesota. After being at the All-Star game, hearing from people from the Minnesota Whitecaps, and again, just seeing how the fan base was supportive, and also knowing that whether it's the WCHA, which unfortunately doesn't have anyone going to the Frozen Four this season, but other than that, there's only been, including this year, 3 times in the history of the women's Frozen Four where a WCHA team was not in the final and then won the final. So I think, yes, trying to thread something further west makes sense to me, to try to get to Minnesota, who they seem like they're in a position where they're very much interested in partnering up with a professional league. I think that makes sense. I think that though the Washington, D.C. market for hockey, I think it could be interesting to see women's hockey down there, especially knowing the youth programs between, I'd say, South Jersey, obviously, the Philly area, and then work your way down to the district, to the DMV. I think that could also be interesting.
Well, I can tell you right now that Haley Skarupa is from Rockville, Maryland, which is about 15 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now.
Yes.
We have the Washington Spirit, which is a team that she played for. We get the D1 college hockey tournament every Thanksgiving down here, which is played at the Capitals practice facility, Kettler, Capitals Iceplex, and which actually does very good on its draws. And then actually my assistant captain on my hockey team, she plays for the District Renegades ice hockey program.
So, soft sell there, huh?
There's my soft sell, right? Well, not only that, but here's my other part of the soft sell. The team comes here to DC, I will work for that team as a color commentator or interviewer.
Wow.
There you go.
I mean, how can you say no to that? Yeah, I think working further west or working south, I think, perhaps I'm biased because I went to school in North Carolina, but it's interesting to see that, we're getting players in the NWHL that are from North Carolina, that are from Florida, and, a way to incorporate their fan base, their families, and the programs that they played for as part of the NWHL community, I think is important. So that's where I see things happening. I mean, you mentioned at the top of this segment, that tease. I don't see the league expanding north, so basically to Canada. I
think it was to Montreal and to Toronto.
Yeah, I don't know that makes good sense right now. Obviously, or maybe not obviously for those who may not know, a lot of conversation. You mentioned Hillary Knight going to La Canadienne. There's been a lot of conversation again about will they or won't they, that being the CWHL and the NWHL, will they merge? Does it make sense to merge? Do they need to merge? And so I think a merger will happen eventually. I'm not of the mindset that it needs to be forced and it needs to be pressed. I think it needs to be well planned and executed, because a shaky merger, I think, will do more harm to women's hockey than good. So if they're going to merge, I would like to see a clear-cut plan on how that's going to happen, what the timeline is, what the logistics are, especially from a player's perspective. I mean, we're starting to see a little bit more certainty and stability in women's hockey and women's hockey opportunities professionally throughout the world, not just in North America. And I think an ill-advised, hasty merger could really impact that.
Yeah, and I know that, that there are probably still some hard feelings dating back to that outdoor game in Boston at Gillette Stadium between the Les Canadiens and the Boston Pride. Plus, not only that, but I read a lot of Elliot Friedman's work and his 31 Thoughts. I think he did it earlier in the season when the Bagulas actually did buy, either when the Bagulas bought the Buttes or after the women's team won the gold medal. And he was saying that the NHL would love to come in and fully support women's hockey, but they don't want to do it with two leagues. They want to do it under one banner. And that creates a problem right there, where the NHL has kind of made it known. It's like, we want to support this, but we don't want to go supporting one league over another. We want to do it under one banner. So it creates all these other conflicts that need to get taken care of at the same time.
Yeah, and Bettman, he was recently on a podcast where he said the same. I have very conflicting thoughts about how much to kind of take those words in. I guess I'm confused because the NHL is saying that they only want to support one league, but then you have individual teams that are supporting either the CWHL or the NWHL. You don't have any team right now that I'm aware of that is offering any kind of support to both a CWHL team and an NWHL team. So
Yep.
The league, the commissioner of the NHL is saying we want to support one, but then how does the communication then cipher down to owners or to the players themselves? The NHLPA is going to be supporting the awards for the CWHL and is in a partnership with the CWHLPA. So again, I think it just is. I hear a lot of the words and I'm reading the words. But again, I just don't know if it's realistic to expect all of those things, as you were saying, to be sorted out right away. And I think it's. I think we need more of those kinds of conversations to happen than just saying, hashtag one league, all the players want it, which, I'm sure is very true and it makes good sense. But let's move on from that. Okay, we've identified a need or a want, a desire. Now what's next? How are we going to get ourselves to that place? And I don't know that the hockey community is having those conversations, at least not publicly, from what I see.
It's a conversation that's tough to have, but I think it's something that's eventually going to have to be had at some point. And to your point, it's probably also the reason why the Boston Bruins isn't supporting a single team in women's hockey, because you have both the Boston Blaze of the CWHL and the Boston Pride of the NWHL, whereas Boston does play at Warriors Ice Arena, which is the Boston Bruins practice facility. So you do have that instance where you do legitimately have two teams in one city, but for two different leagues. So it'll definitely be interesting to see if Boston goes a certain way, the Bruins. That could probably really dictate how things may go in the future.
It may. may not. Again,
Yeah.
it's such a toss-up. Also, a lot has been made of Hillary Knight signing with La Canadiens right before the playoffs, mind you. Will she be there next season? Will she be in another team in the CWHL next season? But also, let's not forget that Mickelson from the Canadian team also signed. She was playing in the CWHL, competed in the Olympics, but then now she's in Sweden. So again, we're seeing players making choices for reasons outside of, they want to, I should say, it appears that players are making decisions outside of just hashtag one league, I'm going to put my faith in this league over that league. I don't think that it's fair to read into decisions that hockey players are making in that way. Certainly not. That's not the only reason, if any. Again, neither league is paying players a livable wage, and so are extremely important. And that's also something that I think is different than where we see the NHL now. I think also what's important is to put this conversation in context. There's some things that have to be considered when looking at a women's hockey landscape and merging that landscape together. Included in that is an increase in salaries. And if you're not willing to do that right away in the first year of the merger, then you have to be able to, for the sake of the players who, players like Hillary Knight and the Lamoureux sisters have said, the Lamoureux sisters have said that they want to start families. Kelly Stack just did an interview with Hannah Beavis for the Ice Garden. She's also talking about that. So what's important professionally and personally changes. And I think a league or leagues for women's hockey, especially if they're not going to pay a livable wage, are going to have to continue to be flexible to that. And that means that we as fans are going to also have to be flexible to that as well.
No, and those are all very fair points to bring up. And we got about 15 minutes left on the show, so I want to bring up Kicking Ice, graphic novel by Stephanie Phillips. Obviously, Txht has contributed to the Kickstarter campaign, which not only reached its goal, but shattered the damn thing. And one of those things I remember Stephanie putting out there in a Kickstarter update was that you and other writers are going to be contributing to Kicking Ice. What can you say about that?
Sure. Well, first I'll say that I've been completely impressed. I've been able to meet and speak with Stephanie a few times now, and I'm just so thankful to have come across the project and to be able to speak to her about the project. And yes, myself along with a few other writers, we will be contributing. There'll be a few additional pages where the history of the women's game will be included. So myself and Mike Murphy will be writing about the NWHL, but the CWHL, the college game, and other things will all be a part of that. And I think that's exciting because we hear a lot, especially whether it was the Team NWHL in Tampa against USA Hockey, or in the Olympics, that we're seeing this great hockey on the ice, but then very seldom are there people, media members, broadcasters that are able to bring the people watching the game in real time into the hockey landscape. So that Stephanie Phillips and the rest of the Kicking Ice team is allowing a few of us to do that, I think is great. And so Mike and I have talked very briefly and are starting to outline a few things, but we want to make the story of the NWHL, we want to kind of open it up to, what brought us into the game and into the league, I should say, from all different perspectives, and also how important, again, role models are, not just for young girls and boys that are playing hockey, but even people like myself. And hopefully I'll be able to concisely articulate some of the ways that the NWHL has opened up opportunities for me that I honestly never considered, including writing and now broadcasting.
And being a guest on this show.
Of course, that's the top of the list.
That's not on the top of anyone's list. Come on. But and it's also I'm not a writer personally. I've written some stories to be turned into screenplays and stuff like that. That's the extent of my writing. But and I guess they can be turned into comics or graphic novels, I guess. But I've always been a person behind the microphone, or now in this case, because I'm on Twitch, in front of a camera behind with a microphone in front of me. But I've been playing hockey all my life, and I've always been playing co-ed hockey. And I've always said that if women had the opportunities that they have now back when I was in high school, some of the women that I would have played with probably would have played in the NWHL. And seeing Kicking Ice coming out, having the NWHL around, the CWHL around, now, and seeing it really help grow the women's game. Obviously, the gold medal win that happened last month, it's great exposure. You and I can have a conversation about certain headlines that have been put out about it, but it's good to see this. I'm happy to not only just financially back it in the Kickstarter campaign, but to help promote Kicking Ice and other avenues, which stay tuned to facebook.com/X75 Productions for that. There will be an announcement made this weekend, and it'll also go up onto Twitter, probably on my personal Twitter account or on the show's Twitter account, because there's some big stuff happening in the near future, especially the fact that I'll be at AwesomeCon in 2 weeks, but that's more of an appearance for me and not what this announcement will be about. But seeing the women's game grow the way it is, I mentioned it earlier. My assistant captain's is a woman who plays also in a women's ice hockey program here in the DC area. In the DCHL where I play, we have it where it's co-ed, but we make the women just as important as the men. And to try to get the ice hockey game up to the level where it is to the men's game is super important, not just to me, but to many others like yourself. And I would love to see, through Kicking Ice, through the Devils' partnership with the Riveters, through the Pagulas owning the Buttes, that this really launches, true equality between the men's and women's hockey game.
Yeah, and I agree with most of that. I'll make a small tweak. I don't think that women's hockey has to aspire to be just like men's hockey or the NHL. I think it's fine for women's hockey to be women's hockey. And the reason that I make that distinction is because I don't think that anyone should aspire to be just like something else or someone else that they see. I think what's beautiful about hockey, the best hockey players are innovative, right? They do things that no one has ever done before. And I think there's an opportunity for women's hockey to be that, to do things like they've never been done before. And they're already doing that. And I think it's okay to celebrate that and not have to always compare it to men's hockey, and not have to even use language where we're making the assumption that they're doing okay for women's hockey or they're doing okay for female athletes. These are women who have won national titles, Olympic medals, world championships, are coaching Division I teams, youth teams, are engineers off the ice. I don't know that there always needs to be a comparison to the men's game. So I think the organic growth of women's hockey is going to be interesting for me to see. But what I will say is that as a diehard baseball fan since forever, I've been opened up to the game of hockey. Attended my first few Devils games, so my first few NHL games just a few months ago because of women's hockey. And so the exposure of something like Kicking Ice to a whether it's the comic market or I know Stephanie and I have talked a lot about how one of the characters is a black girl. As someone who identifies as a black Latina, I don't see a lot of people who look like me or identify as I do in hockey. So I never thought that hockey was something necessarily that I could embrace. But through the NWHL, through the Riveters particularly, I got to see and be exposed to a game that not only, at first, I'll be honest, hockey was a holdover until baseball season. It got me through the winter months. But now I'm a hockey fan, and I'm engaged. I'm a media member, and I think, again, that's what's so exciting about Kicking Ice, is that it's meeting people where they're at, and letting them be a fan or not, quite honestly, but at least opening the door and presenting that opportunity. And unfortunately, hockey, in a lot of other sports, and I could go on and on about youth sports as a kind of how elite they've become, but opening up the door, and maybe not everyone will want to play professionally or even in college, but maybe they'll want to come to a game or they'll listen to a podcast about hockey, and I think that's good for everyone.
Yeah, and just to reiterate a couple of things on my end, I say it as somebody who plays and have seen from the player side of things about how women can be viewed as, especially when it comes to sports. I remember in ice hockey in high school, there was a girl who was much better than me, and I openly admit that. I don't care. She was a better hockey player than me, and I accept that. But the opportunities that were provided to her were not, fair. It's like she should have been like first, second line instead of on the third line or fourth line with me.
Right.
And that's why I say the things that I do, because it's like, I remember when the DCHL first started years ago, it was 4-on-4 and you only had to have one woman on the court. Every team would always hide their female players. Whereas I would be the guy putting out 2 to 3 women at a time and going, go on, take on against our women. And our women would do a lot better than against the guys. We would rarely give up a goal when our women were out on the court. So it was like, for me, it's like playing and seeing how people kind of react to those things, and seeing how the DCHL has grown and what the DCHL and the show wants to do to help grow the women's game within the league itself and introduce more people to playing ball hockey.
Yeah.
That to me is very important, because I would like to see teams, instead of going, oh, well, you only need to have 2 women on the court. Hey, well, you know what? Maybe I want to have 3 women on the court at the same time. Or maybe I want to have 4 women on the court at the same time.
Right.
Against guys. And do that instead on a co-ed team. And it's like, and that's why I say that, because it's like, I would love to see, from a play, at least on my end of things, as a player who's still active competitively, see that, see him on the same level on the playing wise. But I also do see your points in as well.
Yeah. And I mean, again, that's why being able to speak to people from all throughout the country and come from different walks. I mean, I've never played hockey. I played a few ball hockey games. I think scored in my first game, and then by my third game took a slap shot right to the toe and actually lost that toenail. So that's a memory that will last forever. But again, I'm learning. I'm actively learning hockey, and I'm learning about hockey culture, and I think it's great, and that is just something that I'm so excited to be a part of, and I'm so thankful that the hockey community at all levels truly has embraced me. And so some of the preconceived notions that I had about hockey or the hockey community, I'm learning to establish my own thoughts about that. And again, I think that's what Kicking Ice, and I think that's what your show has been able to do. Of course, I tuned in for Anya and Stephanie, but stayed for other things as well, as again, I'm learning the sport, and not just women's hockey. So yeah, I keep doing what you're doing on the ice, definitely on the podcast.
Yeah, and just for the record, anytime you want to come down and play on the Street Sharks, you're more than welcome to try out a game in the DCHL on my team.
Awesome. I might have to take you up on that.
Yeah, we play every Sunday. Right now we're on a 5-week break. We're now in our second of 5 weeks, so we got 3 more weeks after this weekend, then we start playing again. Um, but real quick, where can the people find you in the social media world?
Sure thing. So again, I'm Erica Ayala. I am on social media pretty much across all platforms at elindsay Lindsay 08 elindsay 08. But Twitter is probably the best place to catch me.
All right. And then, of course, ladies and gentlemen, Washington, D.C.'s Comic-Con is back. AwesomeCon is returning to the Walter E. Washington Convention Center in 2 weeks. That's right, in 2 weeks. Come see the cast of Guardians of the Galaxy, including D.C.'s own Dave Bautista, including many more special guests like Stephen Amell, WWE's The New Day, and so much more. Also, on Friday, March 30th at 3:30 p.m. in room 202A, you can see me at Awesomania 6, the pro wrestling fan panel, along with my good friends Ben Taylor and Aaron Oster. Aaron Oster, who writes for the Rolling Stone and the Baltimore Sun. Also, we'll be kicking off that panel with a special tribute to our good friend Mansa, who passed away this January. And then I can finally announce this one, on Sunday, April 1st at 3 p.m., I will be moderating the Michael Kingston Q&A panel along with former WWE superstar The Hurricane, Shane Helms, for Wrestling in Comics. So I'll have more information about that up on Facebook and Twitter in the this weekend, but that one is just announced. I will be moderating Michael Kingston and The Hurricane for Wrestling in Comics on Sunday, April 1st at 3 p.m. You can follow the show on Twitter at TXHT_hockey. Join our Patreon community today at patreon.com/TXHT_hockey. Follow us here on Twitch at twitch.tv/TXHT_hockey. And on Facebook at facebook.com/TXHThockey. No underscore for that one because somebody took that from me. Stay tuned to facebook.com/X75Productions and to my personal Twitter account of @TheLindenBomb75, as I will be putting out some big announcements. This is some stuff that has been in the works for the last couple weeks for the growth of X75 Productions. And of course, stay tuned because I believe in a couple, when we do AwesomeCon, we'll be doing the show live from AwesomeCon. And then also coming up the weekend after that, we'll be having Suds from the DCHL to go over all the DCHL championship games for that following Sunday. So lots coming up, lots of craziness. OV got 600, Nashville Predators clinched, Tampa Bay can clinch today. We'll talk about all that stuff next week on the show. Erica, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching TXHT Serious Hockey Talk for serious hockey fans.